One of my favorite authors has always been Flannery O'Connor. Flannery O'Connor was a Catholic woman in the South in the 1940s and 50s, dying in the last century. And she wrote about things that we would call today grotesque. People who were oddly shapen or oddly formed either on the inside or the outside, but somehow she allowed those characters to live and breathe and be in ways that identified what we needed to know and learn about God. I think my favorite story of hers, short story, is called Revelation. Mrs. Turpin and her husband are the main characters. They go to the doctor's office, and Mrs. Turpin is there to wait, and she hopes the time is short, like we all do at every doctor's office, and instead it goes on forever, and she is surrounded by all kinds of people that she calls black people, and she uses the N-word, which we don't use, and white trash, and crying children, and sniffling adults, and all kinds of stuff is going on. And Mrs. Turpin in her heart gives thanks to God that she is not like these folks, that she is better than they. And there's one precocious little girl, young lady across the way, and her name is Mary Grace. And she's watching what Mrs. Turpin is doing, how Mrs. Turpin is dressed and the jewelry she's wearing, and how she wants to look her best, and maybe looking that best helps her feel better about herself and feel that herself is better than others. And Mary Grace is reading a book on human development. And she takes that book and she throws the book at Mrs. Turpin, striking her in the head and knocking her out. No one can understand why she did it, except that when Mary Grace goes over to get her book, she whispers in Mrs. Turpin's ear, "Go back to hell where you came from, you old warthog." The day continues and the Turpins go home. And Mrs. Turpin is given a vision. I don't know if it's like Jacob's vision or just what. She's given a vision. And that vision is of a bridge of people crossing over from earth into heaven. I used to always think of it as like a divine escalator, but at any rate, it's a bridge. And on it, all the people that Mrs. Turpin has deemed less than cross before she. They all get to heaven first. And this changes her and convicts her and helps her to see just really who she is as a religious and personal hypocrite, supposing herself to be better than others, but not really. And I could have a lot to say about this story because it's just so much there, it's so rich, so full. But let me say this. The only people that Jesus had arguments with were people who had religious backgrounds and used it to feel better than about themselves, to feel better than put themselves in a better place than others. And Jesus judges them pretty harshly. Our faith doesn't make us any better than anyone else. In fact, maybe our faith enlightens us and enlivens us to see just who we really are. And that, but for the grace of God, we are in grave moral danger. It also makes us humble, or it should. So, don't be like Mrs. Turpin. Don't even really be like Mary Grace. Be like Jesus, as someone who has allowed themselves to simply and totally be who they are, equal, loved by God like everybody else, and also called to love others. In Christ's name, amen.